Hello, everyone. Welcome to Art School Live with me, Charlie Easton. No Eric again today. Eric is off traveling, and so yeah, you're stuck with me. However, when you get stuck with me, I then get to introduce you to some people that you may or may not know, and I am thrilled today to be able to bring in an artist that I absolutely love. And I love him so much that I got him to paint my kids. I'll show you these portraits later. The artist is David Vegt, and he is an absolute gem. He's going to come on now. And David, are you there?
Yes,
David,
I am.
What are you going to tell us about today?
Well, basically, I'm going to talk about how I layer a three-layered painting. I'm doing a self-portrait, and we're going to also talk about how to layer meaning into your work before, during, and after.
Oh, juicy. We got layers of layers of layers. So let's get this show on the road.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rose. Now, here's your host, Eric Rose.
I'm going to go jealous of Eric with his montages. I think I need a montage. I don't think anyone's ever done a montage of me. That would be cool. There you go. There's a life goal. Get to a montage ability. Okay, so today, as we've already mentioned, we've got the wonderful David Vegt coming to you from the 𝗕𝗂𝗶𝗹𝗶 Valley in British Columbia. Amadine, have you got some of David's work that we can show you? Guys, you really should go to David Vegt. That's V-E-G-T. Look at that. This is a painting, commission painting that David has done. Aren't they spectacular? Anyway, davidvect.com, or go to his socials, which is just at David Vect, and go and become familiar with his artwork, because you'll see that David is one of these artists that can paint anything. And by that, I mean the work that he does, whether it's landscape, or either in the studio, plein air work, figurative work, it all has a vibrancy and a life to it. And I know from speaking to him briefly, there's a real sense of purpose in his work. And we're going to find out about that today. As David's already mentioned, we're going to talk about layers of meaning, in particular in self-portraiture. So David, come on screen. Let's say hi.
Hey, how are you doing, Charlie?
I am really well, and I'm pumped to have you here today, David. And as you were mentioning on the screen, we've got double David here.
Yeah. So today I thought I would actually get into a self-portrait I'm working on. And I've actually tried to do things a little bit differently than I normally do, just to show a little bit more of the process. So as you can see here, oh, go ahead.
No, I said that's great. I'm just making good noises.
Yeah, so I actually have a drawing aspect here that's just on the plain white lead primed. It's a linen on an aluminum panel. And then I have a little bit of a grisaille happening on the neck, where I've actually just used burnt umber. And then I've actually used a third layer going into the face. So just for the purpose of this program, I thought I would show a little bit of the layering process and have all three kind of sort of started and almost to finish. Not quite finished, because I'll still do a glaze over the face. But yeah, and actually, coincidentally, the lighting in my studio right now, with the way we have things set up, is not actually that different from how it was set up for the actual photograph that I use as a reference.
Yes, indeed. Should we pull that up? There we go.
So my daughter and I went on a trip to Italy this spring. And while we were in Florence, we got to stop in and see the statue of David. Of course, having it be my namesake, I thought it was kind of funny and fun at the time to just stand and sort of kind of hold my arm the same way he did, with the sling over his shoulder. But of course, it's a very different thing. And so, yeah, I can talk more about the layers that I started to realize in the meaning of coming to that place. Sometimes you're in the moment, and you don't actually recognize the significance of something until later. And so that's what happened in this situation. Jokingly with my daughter, setting up a pose, and then realizing afterwards, this was really significant to me for a lot of reasons.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, do you want me to just kind of go through into the painting session now, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so I just ask you a question on that? So is that where you obviously have a practice where you have like you do commission portrait works of people like my kids. Look at these, everyone. This is my daughter. This is my daughter Frances. This is a painting David did. You can't quite see with the glare, but it's just two paintings that he did of my kids that I absolutely adore, and he nailed the likeness of it. And you obviously get commission work like that, but then when you're developing your own work, like a painting that you've got on the easel today, how do you find your inspiration from that? It sounds like with this one of David, it was kind of a bit of happenstance and then recognizing something interesting. Is that how most of them happen?
Yeah, I would say generally what happens is I will, sometimes it's a moment where I just see something and it really captures my attention, and I'll take a picture of it, and it'll sort of sit in my photo log for maybe 6 months. And then as I'm kind of cruising through photos for references for things, something will either jump out or it'll kind of just fall up to the wayside. And this whole idea of a self-portrait, I really liked the lighting, so that was part of it. The other thing, obviously, was that there was a really special time with my daughter, and but also just it really became about reflecting, and obviously as self-portraits are, I've done probably about 4 self-portraits now. Most of them really small. This is definitely the largest self-portrait I've ever done. But I just wanted to kind of capture something that really stuck with me. And then the layers started to come as I began the painting. So as I was drawing the composition, all of a sudden I started to realize little things that were kind of like interesting. Like, for example, all I have so far in here, and I can't really move my camera too much the way it's set up, but I have just the feet of the statue of David. And actually it's mostly 1 foot and then just his heel and then the calf on the other side. And then what's really interesting is in my reference, I noticed that my hairline was literally just grazing, like by a hair, the feet of David. So I think what it started to mean for me was this idea, and often as ideas do, they kind of come to you after something happens. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh wow, that's really interesting that I can sort of, I feel very much below, we all kind of feel below the masters. And one of the things that I really aspire to is to create a quality of work that would at least get to the a hair closer to the masters of the past. So I really do kind of think, and I look back to the masters of the past, but I also then realized that my gaze was kind of linear across this base. And what I noticed was that, like, if we're, here in the West, we read left to right. And so the right, looking to the right in that sense is towards the future in my mind. And so I'm kind of looking, I'm touching the past and I'm looking to the future. And, that idea of like, and then having my own arm kind of like curled in, I started thinking about, there's that sense of connection to the sling and my own namesake, like David, the story in the Bible, he's basically this little kid who's, facing this giant, Goliath. And yet here he is in this statue form by Michelangelo that is a giant himself, right? Like the size of the David statue is massive. So, there's so many things that are starting to loop through in my mind about, myself, about art history, about, my connection to, the masters, but also, looking towards the future. And I'm a teacher as well. So I I teach at a little, little studio space here in my little town of Cumberland. And I'm looking at like the teenagers and, the young people that are going ahead of me. And it's a self-reflective year because I turned 50 this year, or sorry, next year in May. And so it was just all these things that were coming together for me. And so it made sense to continue with this self-portrait.
Wow. That's great. Thank you for giving us the background on this, because it's clearly it's going to be, and it already is, a painting that has clearly some deeper meaning in there. And it's interesting that you've kind of found it from looking at your imagery and noticed many different elements that are coming out of it. So that's great. And we've had lots of comments already, people admiring your work. If you haven't checked it out, go to his website. And somebody even said you should be standing on his shoulders.
Oh, wow.
So they loved your work. There was one question just technically, and I'm sure we're going to get into more of this as we go, but there was a question technically about the surface that you're working on. And did you attach the linen to the aluminum, or is that just a product that you purchased?
No, I just purchased the product. Yeah, it's
okay.
An aluminum panel, has like a honeycomb material, so it's actually a little bit thicker than just like a thin aluminum. It's backed with this sort of honeycomb technology. I don't know how else you would call it, but it's about 1/4 inch thick. And then it's a Belgian linen. It's like a extra fine linen that's been adhered to the panel. And there are lots of different places that I think do it. It just works really well for me. And I am doing things a little bit differently just for this painting, because I just thought it would be kind of cool to show the different layers and ways of doing layering. Like I even have a wash that's in the background here that is not of a burnt umber, but that's what I'm using for the body. And I sometimes just experiment, so sometimes I'll do a wash of burnt umber, the whole thing, and then, just wipe out with a little bit of odorless mineral spirits, or, like a 𝗕𝘂𝗶𝗹𝗂 kind of thing. And I'll wipe out the highlights. Like I did that a little bit in this ear. And like in the neck here, you can see the muscle kind of coming down the neck, which incidentally, like I went to the Portrait Society of America for the first time this May, whenever it was, just like, was it May? Yeah. Anyways, I took a class with this guy, Dan something, and he was talking about anatomy and specifically this muscle. And I remember thinking, like, it's really hard to get it to pop, but the way that Michelangelo had David turned, it just pops out. Like I was just like, oh, okay, that's interesting. He had that his pose. But anyway, I kind of digress.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay, great. Well, let's. I'll stop with my questions for now. But if anyone's following live and wants something asked, do pop it in the chat, and I will see if I can interject it.
Okay, good. I'm just looking for. Yeah, there it is. So when I'm working, I often have a screen of some kind. Sometimes it's my iPad. Right now I'm using that for our filming, so I'll use my phone, and I'll just have a reference of like something I'm working on. So right now, if I'm kind of looking at working on the hand and the sleeve, and maybe some of the shadow behind or underneath that, like I'll basically just have that held in my hand, and then I'll just basically start putting some paint on. So if that works for you,
let's do it.
So basically when I'm doing the sort of the grisaille layer or the underpainting layer, I'll put a little bit of odorless mineral spirits on my brush, and I'll kind of just get a little bit of a really thinned out paint on my brush. So
and you're just using burnt umber, right?
Yeah, burnt umber. I do have a little bit of white that I've got in my mix. Basically, if I kind of like hold up my palette here, I've got basically a run from like a warm white, and then I've just slowly mixed in a little bit of it into the burnt umber. I think I added a little bit of the ultramarine blue as well, just in some of the middle mix there, but most of it is just burnt umber and white. But yeah, just to get a cooler mix in there, I added a little bit of ultramarine as well. But for this point, it's just going to be burnt umber, thinned out with a little bit of white in it, just because I don't want it to be super, super dark. And then I'll just kind of add, you know, a little bit of it to the sleeve. And I know it'll be too dark for what I'm looking for in the sleeve. But just to cover it for now. And then, you know, kind of, I'm not really going into the background at all. You know, if I do a full grisaille or full wash, you know, because the problem with white anytime on your canvas, and the only reason I can do this is I kind of know mentally that white will always make things look way darker. If you have white, yeah, like it's basically everything else around it's going to seem super dark. So, but for this, I did want to kind of show, you know, having multiple layers. So, and because I'm just kind of doing this one little section, I feel like I can kind of get away with it this time. So yeah, I'm just adding it into the sleeve here. And it's a really thin wash, so you know, it's not like I'm gonna hold on to all this paint and keep it there. But even just as I've gotten a section of it wiped on, I can then take like a dry brush and I can sort of pull some of that paint back off, and it kind of creates just a slightly lighter, a lighter effect. And I know it's kind of hard for you not to see my reference here, but I just had this sleeve that kind of had, I don't know if you can see it on my reference picture there. I see a little picture in the corner there, but it might not show the sleeve. But yeah, basically I'm just kind of pulling some out, and then sometimes what I'll do is I actually have like a whole box of Q-tips. And if I want to get in and do some real sort of detailed highlighting or whatever, I can just sort of like go with my Q-tip, and it just pulls the paint off, you know, really nicely, like that kind of thing. So, and then if I'm looking, I've got kind of like a highlighted area here, sort of like the sleeve. So I'll just pull some of that out, and on top here too.
And I know that this sounds obvious, but you're thinking purely in value right now.
Yeah. So right now I'm kind of working with like middle values. It's not super dark. I'm just trying to look for my, oh, there it is, bigger picture here. Yeah, so it's not very dark. It's definitely not near the darkest darks, and even like the area that is the darkest of this value, you know, mix here, it's still not it's not actually that dark compared to like a black. So that really it really helps to kind of define later. And the thing is too, like I'm not one of those get it right the first time type painters. Yeah. I'm one of those more sloppy, like I go, okay, well, this looks pretty good, and I'll move on to the next thing. But I'm more one of those painters who will you know, just slowly build up and correct and work on it, you know, sort of get it to where I want it eventually. So, and that can be not the easiest for some people. Like I used to be very perfectionistic, or is that a word? Perfectionist, and need it to all be perfect right away. And then you kind of realize after a while, the beauty of oil paint is that you can change it, you know, 100 times, and you can just keep adding layers to it essentially. Like, so I'm going to kind of get into the thumb here a little bit and just put some of that in there. And again, like this layer is so not that important to me as far as like getting it perfect. It's just about kind of darkening it up.
And you're working within a sketched out drawing that you've put onto your linen there. there was a question whether you used a grid to do that.
I use plumb lines, so I don't really like grids because if you use a grid, I just find it kind of almost limiting in like you rely too much on the grid. I'll just use plumb lines. So like, for example, I don't know if you're familiar at all with the Bargue plate method, but what Charles Bargue did was he would put plumb lines through really significant areas of drawings. So you know, like I'll have a plumb line going through the middle of the face here, and then I'll kind of measure off that plumb line to see where the tip of the nose is. You know, and there are certain things that you learn anatomically after painting portraits for a long time, like the fact that the middle of the ear runs around to the nose. Mm-hmm. Like that line there is a significant line. And then often like the bottom of the teeth will go around to the jaw line, little things like that, which you kind of learn. And then it's also just about, you know, really paying attention to your drawing. Yeah, so I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, no, it does, and it's very cool right now. We've got David looking at David. It's we can see the two sides of you there.
Yeah, yeah. So
with the same glasses.
Yeah, my glasses are up on my head, which I often do. Like I actually have transitions in my glasses, but my eyes have actually gotten worse since, and I for whatever reason, like the distance in between reading and painting, it works still to take my glasses off my head. So yeah, all the fun things that come with age, right? So I'm looking here at my shadow, and I do realize that I've kind of gone, yeah, no, that's about right. There's this kind of like dark shadow area that sort of comes up underneath my hand, and I'm just kind of running it down to see about where I want it to be. And eventually I'll actually run, you know, the paint down this way as far as like where I'll have it connect. Because I know my sweater, at least in my picture that I have here, the sweater actually kind of comes straight down like this. And then the arm kind of has its own thing going on here. So, and sometimes like, you know, my drawing, I want to get basic lines, but I know that like, and I'm trying to draw them in as close as I can to what I have as my image. But, you know, what I'll do sometimes to double check myself is, and I know some people just say this is outright cheating, but I find it really helpful, is I'll take a picture of my painting with my phone. I'll crop it down to like a 3x4, and then I'll maybe even crop my my photograph of my reference to be 3x4, try to get it to a similar size, and then I'll just kind of like switch back and forth between my image and my my reference and my painting in my phone. And it does kind of just like allow me to see these really, really small inaccuracies that kind of helps me, like it guides me kind of back on track. So I know some people are really against all that stuff, and I'm like, well, that's what I do.
Yeah, I don't know how that could be seen as cheating.
Well, yeah, I know, it's hilarious, like that I even have it in my head. But so yeah, some people are real purists, you know, they say, you know, you just have to draw and paint from life, and you know, everything else is not the real thing. But I kind of think that, you know, it should be a personal preference. And I mean, I know professional painters in New York who are absolutely astounding, and they have no problem with using photographs and you know, references in that way. But yeah, that's just how I work. But yeah.
So David, I know that we've had some technical challenges with camera angles earlier on today, but if you could work, and I don't want to direct you too much, but if you could work on the hand upwards, then that's within sight.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Anything below kind of like the zipper level, we can't really see there. So.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'm just starting to see that now. I'm yeah, that makes sense.
And just for your benefit, we've got about 20 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, like I do want to talk a little bit more about creating meaning. I think that really, even though like, we're looking at layers and if people have technical questions, I'm absolutely happy to answer them. But for me, like, when doing a self-portrait specifically, I really recommend every artist who is at all interested in portraiture or figurative work to consider doing a self-portrait. I mean, it's really a big thing that a lot of painters in the past have done. And I think the purpose of them is to be very much reflective and, to consider your life. I mean, I just found out the other day that still lifes were centered around the topic of death. And I was like, wow, that's heavy. But I think that self-portraits should be, about our lives, like where we've come, where we've been, and to really connect it. So yeah, for me, I feel like the fact that I've come as far as I have, I'm now a full-time painter. I was a stonemason for 18 years, and I never thought I would actually get to paint full-time. And the fact that I am now is just astounding to me, and I'm very fortunate. I look at myself as a completely lucky or blessed, or however you want to put it, individual, because I know that it's not something that's doable for majority of painters. So
yeah, there's obviously something very reflective, well, clearly obviously, about looking at yourself to paint yourself, but it's I think that's a point very well made. It's like you're not just observing when you're doing a portrait, you're not just observing the shapes of color, but there's the meaning behind them and where they are and the wrinkles and what caused the wrinkles and all of the elements that come into it.
Yeah, I mean, some of them I'm proud of. Like these smile wrinkles are a good sign that things have been going okay. Like I'm not like this in my paintings as much. But yeah, no, I think that the idea of doing a self-portrait is reflective. It can be a chance for you to think about what you have coming up in your future, and a chance to kind of reset as well. Yeah. So for this painting, the other sort of side of it, like I'm very familiar with the story of David. I grew up in a very conservative home where the stories of the Bible were a big deal, and they, the idea that, so David, the name David means to be beloved, so like he is loved, and the idea that I get to paint people because I find that people are what matter, and we're living in a world right now where it seems like people don't matter, in a lot of ways, but that's a long and big topic. We're not going to get into that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I am aware that I'm using sort of like a middle tone value for the shadow of the hand, and maybe just to get into the hand a little bit more here, I'll go lighter. Now in my photograph, I know it's going to be like a pink, a pinkish color or whatever, but for the grisaille level, I just want to get it lighter than my the shadow side. And I had this instructor. I was very fortunate to take a course with this guy, Vincent Desiderio, he's from New York. And he kind of told me about how when you have an area where it goes from shadow to the light, where the most color happens is right on the border. Mm-hmm. So anything that comes through from the shadow side to the light side, you're going to have the most local color essentially happening right on that edge. And I think John Singer Sargent said that the middle values are the silent values, essentially. So like in my face here, even in the shadows, you're going to see this creeping up from in the light to in the shadow. And this section right here is where the most sort of reddish tones will be. I will still be glazing this and kind of like making it a bit more subtle. Right now I put a really thick amount of white up on the forehead. It's way brighter than it will be in my finished painting. But even as I'm looking in the camera here, I can see this like part of my, forehead that's like very, very bright. And of course, cameras, they will like the exposure just kind of blows out. So in a painting, we're really fortunate that we can come back over top of areas like this that look blown out and just glaze over top of them and bring them back to a more lifelike value. So, yeah.
So that's interesting. So you've got this grisaille that you're putting in with your burnt umber, a little bit of white, a little bit of ultramarine blue, and then once that is there, the next step is to start the glazing process, or you're laying in pretty thick paint after that?
No, yeah. So I'll when this grisaille part is done, I actually do kind of like an 𝗕𝘂𝗶𝗹𝗶 color layer on top of that. So I'm not really glazing color on. I'm still actually doing an 𝗕𝘂𝗶𝗶 layer on top of it. So probably, some people would say that's like not a necessary extra process, but for me, painting, especially doing something meditative like a self-portrait, there are times when I'll work just more 𝗕𝘂𝗶𝗶 and not worry about glazing as much and just do, a straight on like maybe 2 layers where I do, an underpainting, and then I'll do, the underpainting is the grisaille, and then I'll do like a color over top, and that'll be it. But when I'm wanting to do things that are really connected to kind of like the historical way of painting that goes sort of all the way back to Rembrandt, then I'll do like all 4 layers, where I'll do the drawing, the underpainting, grisaille, the sort of color layer, and then the glazing is really more just about like, it's glazing and scumbling. So what I've been told, again, from my friend Vincent Desiderio, he said that glazing is essentially putting a darker color over a lighter color. So I'll glaze over this area here to darken it, but then you can also use a scumble, which is basically taking a darker area and scumbling a lighter color over top of it. So that's really the only difference between a scumble and a glaze, is that the glaze is a darker color going over a light, and a scumble is a light color going over a dark.
But both of those would have medium within it?
Yeah. So I'll use either just like a medium that's mixed of linseed oil with a little bit of 𝗕𝘂𝗶𝗃, like a 50-50 mix. Or sometimes I'll use, like, I'm pretty open to using a lot of different things. Sometimes I've used liquin. Not using liquin anymore because I really don't like the smell of it. But yeah, usually just sort of a mix, a medium that's made up, either homemade one, or sometimes you can even just use like a straight linseed oil or a walnut oil or something like that. But then you've got to make sure that you're not like the whole fat over lean rule. I'm sure you've heard of it, where you don't want to be mixing. You don't want to use thinner paints over thicker. So if you're using a lot of oil in your glaze, that's got to be your last layer, because it's essentially just straight fat, right? It's just straight oil with a little bit of pigment in it, compared to what comes out of the tube, which is a much stronger mix of color pigment with either walnut or linseed oil.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I've only ever really heard of and used the term scumble when it's like dry brush.
Oh, okay.
Hitting just the surface, the peaks of the canvas or the peaks of whatever paint is underneath.
Yeah.
But that's interesting, and I can certainly see it in your work, in the finished pieces, where you get an extra level of richness both in the lights and in the darks.
Yeah, and I mean, that really is tricky to get right off the bat. I mean, you will try to mix your all the colors on your palette, and you'll feel like you have, like, one thing I do is I teach about value in my classes, and I tell the students, okay, grab your white and your black, or maybe a burnt umber mixed with ultramarine blue, and mix up like 5 values, I'll tell them. and they'll mix up those values, and then I'll say, okay, now put those values that you mixed on there, and I'll have it on a gray palette for them, like a number 5 value gray palette. And then I'll tell them to put a square, inch square of each of them beside each other in a row with a little bit of white in between. And it's crazy how many times they'll have like a really light white kind of thing, and then they'll just jump right to a darker value that's like 3 values too dark kind of thing. So even at my level where I've been painting for 15 years, there's values that I just don't see right away, and they end up kind of coming in between as I continue the layers.
And you build your control.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were a couple of questions just coming in, if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah.
Do you always paint from photographs?
No, actually, I'll go out and do plein air painting. Then I'm doing landscapes basically from life. I've definitely done sitting models, although as everyone knows, a sitting model is not free. And you know, I think it's, and I mean, you'll hear this again and again from artists. They'll say, you really do need to work from life before working from photos, or at least, you know, if you start with photos, get a chance, if it's a friend or a brother or sister or mother or somebody that you know will have the patience to sit there, because seeing the values in life, yeah, you're not going to get them in photographs in the same way. I do use photographs because it is obviously a lot easier, but even just the camera quality these days is a lot better, and those middle values do show up. But again, like I'm just looking at the camera and I'm like, this is just blown right out and up here. So like things like that, you're never going to get that from like without sort of seeing it in real life. Like that's just not going to happen. So, but there are things that you can do to correct that. So, and again, like with photographs too, that can really sort of distort if you're really up close. So if you are going to use photographs for portraits or anything like that, make sure you're actually back far enough from your subject so that things don't get really blown out. If you're back a good, 5 feet or so, things are going to be pretty proportional for at least the person. Maybe the background will be wonky or whatever still, but I find it works well enough.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So, yeah. As I go here, I'm really just sort of getting in the basic values. I have one of those sort of ADHD brains that I can't do too many things at once. So if I try to like talk to you and paint, it'll just kind of be like not really.
You're doing great, David. You're doing great.
But yeah, I mean, I think that doing a self-portrait, especially adding areas or layers to it. So again, like I said, I'm painting layers, and I'm adding layers of thought to it as well. I studied English literature and philosophy, and so there's so many things that you can add into it for yourself. Like first I can think about the fact that I'm aging. I'm not getting younger. I can think about my connection to history and the art history, and even these two. I mean, you can't see them; they're in the corner over here. But I have these two figures that when I was at the museum, one guy was kind of looking way up, and you can see like his line of sight is looking straight up at that David. And this guy is like, he's kind of like walking off and looking ahead. And I just thought it was interesting to even have these sort of little figures in the background, sort of almost as like two sort of perspectives outside of myself that are also looking, sort of to be aware that, I'm very self-conscious of this idea of like even making a self-portrait. It feels really like self-indulgent, and yet I think we need to take time to think about our own life and how we're contributing and all of those things. So yeah,
it's fascinating because I tell you the amount of times that I've been into museums and have been like, I was in the Art Institute of Chicago last year, and I was sat in that room with all those Monets, and I was looking at all the paintings, but also at the same time, it was so cool looking around at all the people that were in the museum. And some of them were taking photographs very similar to the one that you've taken with David there. And it's so cool to think that actually maybe one of those people in there will be creating art based off all of this inspiration, and maybe doing it to the level that you're doing it as well, David. So it's very cool to see.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah,
what we've got a lot of people asking about seeing the finished painting, or seeing the painting from distance. And I know that we can't do it right now because of the camera issues, but perhaps, and this is here we go. We're going to get you a whole load of new followers now. If you go on to David's Instagram and follow him, I'm sure he'll post a story after this of the reference and the photo and the photograph of where you are right now. Would that be okay to ask you to do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'll probably work on this for the next couple weeks. I've been working on a bunch of other commissions. I have this crazy situation where I actually have a patron full time right now, and
I love it. Everything's about the old masters here. It's the painting, and then the honestly, business relationships.
Yeah, like I'm as a stonemason, I was working away at this job, and this guy, you know, like can't get into it, but basically I have a patron right now who is I'm working on a bunch of paintings for him, and I feel like I was joking with my partner saying like, yeah, I think I was born like 150 years too late, you know, and then all of a sudden here I am still oil painting in 2025 for a patron. So, you know, you never know. You just never know.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So, David, is there anything else on this on the painting that we can see here right now that you would you'll be able to show us, or are you kind of finishing up with that hand, or what's the next step? Talk us through that.
Yeah. So basically, you know, I'm doing a very rough sort of sketch in right now of the values, because my brain cannot necessarily draw really accurately and talk and be aware of the fact that I'm on camera. So I will likely at this stage, I will probably go back to my reference and I'll look at the drawing specifically of the fingers. You know, it's fairly loose right now with the way I drew it in. I know I'm where I want to be, because I kind of like measure the distance between my knuckles and my chin, and like I look at the negative spaces often to find out where my drawing needs to be. But it's down to the smaller details now that I don't want to completely you know, ignore. So I would likely take, and that's one thing I'd actually mention too, is that you need to use, or I personally use, a brush that is conducive to the size of what I'm working on. So I'll use a really big brush to put in this wash. I'll use a medium brush to do some of the sort of larger areas in the neck and that. And then when I'm working on either the lips or the nose or in the fingers, then I'll switch to a quite small brush, just so I can get some of those creases or, you know, lines in that that work. So other than that, I think I'd probably just start to, you know, put in some of the other values around it. Like I can start to put in, you know, like around here. I know that the hoodie I'm wearing kind of has like a bit of light coming through, so I can add some of these like lighter values kind of in here. And again, like this is basically like only two values right here. And in my, you know, in my reference, I know there's going to be transitions between those, and I'll kind of like wipe out. I can even like if I put this sort of lighter medium value in like this, I can sort of cheat back. So I'll put a little bit there. I can cheat back and use my Q-tip and just pull back out a little bit, and it'll kind of like scrape back so that I get a little bit more of a variation. Probably can't see too much in the camera right from that distance, but it'll just help with some of the transitions. So, but yeah.
What I love about this, David, it's like we've got the reference up on screen right now, because we can see the side of your face in a very similar light condition to what we've got going on here. It's like we know what you're looking at.
Yeah. So it's fun to you know, stand back a little bit and kind of go like, yeah, holy sick, that looks like me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, you know, you're on the right track when you can recognize yourself, right?
Well, yeah, and what I love about this, you know, compared to my work, and for those of you who are following along today and aren't familiar with it, go to @CharlieEaston on Instagram or to charlieeaston.com. Is my work is a very immediate response to place, and it's almost like I'm just throwing stuff at the canvas and trying to have a kind of immediate guttural reaction to how I'm feeling and the motion of the landscape that's happening in front of my eyes. And so there's I think often I need a bit more David Vect in my life, in that I need to be have a bit more control. So I love the way that you're applying this paint, and that there is a real consideration for, as you said, the layers of value and the layers of paint. So I love seeing the way that different people go about their practice.
Yeah. One thing I do that I'm not doing right now because we're on film like this is I will often place a lot of different sort of values or whatever, and then I'll make sure that I step back. My studio, it's kind of like a long tube. I have a fairly low ceiling, unfortunately, but it's about 20 feet long and only 8 feet wide. And
Right.
so it's kind of nice. It's kind of you know, I can go all the way back to my door, which is 20 feet back, and I can kind of look at things from there and be like, oh, okay, that's really standing out as too light or too dark compared to what I would want. And I can put my glasses on, or I can take my glasses off, and I can see the value shifts that way too. If you wear glasses, just take your glasses off, you'll see the values a lot better. If you've got 20/20 vision, you're going to have to squint. Sometimes I tell my students, I'll say, like, close one eye and then just look through your eyelashes on the open eye, and it'll really sort of make all the details disappear, and then the values really stand out.
Fantastic. Well, David, I think is there anything else that you want to share with us today, or shall I just point people to your website and your Instagram socials one more time, and we'll get you a bunch of new followers so we can see where this painting ends up?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Yeah, right on. Well, I can see in the chat there's lots of people have really appreciated you sharing your process today, and not just the process technically, but the way that you conceive of the painting, and the honesty and openness that is required for you to do a portrait, a self-portrait like the one that you got going on. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for my beautiful portraits of my little 𝗕𝗂𝗃𝗃, because yeah, I look at them and smile every day. So thanks again, David.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was easy with your kids. They're really cute.
Oh, right on. Well, thank you. Okay, so Amandine, let's get this wrapped up. I really appreciate everyone tuning in for us today, but I've just got a couple of little things to mention. We have, as I mentioned yesterday, a free gift for you. We've got 97 incredible art secrets that if you go to 97artsecrets.com/ASL, you can download a free video. There's tons of good stuff on there, and as the name suggests, it's free, so that's great. If you haven't signed up for Gouache Live, it's time to get on that. Main tickets start at $47, only $47, and that's on August 23rd of this year. There's an incredible lineup of instructors, some lovely people, and some incredible artists that they'll be teaching you about gouache painting, which is something that's so good to have, like multiple media. Even if you're an oil painter like David, or an acrylic painter like myself, to be able to go and do different mediums is so important. You can pack them different size, you can get different things out of them, and then when you go back to your regular medium, you will have a new appreciation for it. Okay, well, let's check in and find out where Eric is. Amandine, do you know where he is?
Guess where I am? Where in the world? Well, I am in Beijing Airport. It's absolutely modern and beautiful. It's about 100 degrees, though, and this particular room does not have any air conditioning. But my guests, or my hosts, have picked me up, and we are heading out to begin our trip. It's going to be 3 weeks here in China, and we're really excited about it. Just wanted to check in, let you know I made it here safely, and hopefully you'll get this message. Bye-bye.
Oh, there we are, our fearless leader, just going out and finding out about new art practices, new art materials. So I can't wait to see more from Eric. Everyone, make sure you subscribe to this channel at Art School Live on YouTube or at Eric Rhodes on Instagram, and you'll see more of his travels. Thanks for joining me today. As I said, my name's Charlie Easton. Check out my work at Charlie Easton or at 𝗕𝘂𝗶𝗹𝗁. And I also have a new video. I haven't mentioned it today, but if you're interested, mastering acrylic landscapes, and lots of the stuff that I talk about in that video is more about seeing the world, seeing landscapes, and it applies to all mediums. So there you go, quick plug of that one. But thank you for joining me today. Thanks to David for sharing his wisdom. As I said, I think he paints in a very different way to I do. So, and maybe to you as well. But that's the joy of the art world that we live in. There's so many different tentacles to it, so many different facets, and we can learn from all of them. So thanks for learning with me today, and I'll see you tomorrow.